everybody, Plushie here, and today bringing you with another signature of mine, a super late hot take video right before the banner ends. I apologize, but I really easily get caught up by other stuff in my daily schedule. But finally, we are going to talk about the second SSR of this event, who is Ruler Melusine. And at this point, this is yearly tradition. We're just gonna get a super powerful AoE arts looper every year summer, and certainly this is a character that is worthy of competition compared to the previous iterations of this archetype. So without further ado, let's take a look at Ruler Melusine in today's hot take video. Ruler Melusine's first skill is a 3-turn arts up, a 3-turn critical damage up, and a 3-turn anti-chaotic power mod, all for 30% for 3 turns. And then also this comes with a 1000 damage cut for her other teammates, not including herself, for 3 turns. And all of this is on a 6-turn cooldown. So right out the gate, we already have a super powerful compound effect skill. 30% arts up helps her MP refund as well as her MP damage. 30% critical damage up is also a nice starting point because she is a crit servant, as we'll see very soon when talking about her second skill, and her MP has even more support to it. So this is definitely a buff that also supports her playstyle. And then the 30% anti-chaotic power mod means that it also applies to her face cards. This also once again pairs pretty well with her critical damage playstyle. And in general, it's just a good anti-trait mod. It is only 30%, but we'll see very soon when we talk about her MP once again why this is only 30%. And chaotic is a relatively widespread trait, especially amongst a lot of servants, so definitely good coverage option. And then finally, the 1000 damage cut does not apply to herself, which is a bit of a shame. I really like the combo of rulers with damage cut, but you know, on the flip side, because she is a ruler, she does not need nearly as much babysitting as her other teammates potentially, so this is a really good defensive skill. It is straight up 3 turns instead of something like 3 turn 3 times, so it can protect your teammates very well. So overall, you know, this is a really good compound effect skill. It has all of the very solid effects that you want in a skill, and the cooldown doesn't really suffer from it, so really good skill. Melusine's second skill is a 3-turn 500% star absorb up, a 3-turn star per turn generation effect that gives her 10 stars every single turn, that gets boosted to 30 stars every single turn if she is in the airspace or water side battlefield, and it's also a 10-star star bomb that gets boosted to 30 stars as well if she is in the airspace or water side battlefield. This skill only has a 5-turn cooldown. So this is a pretty decent bread and butter crit skill. This will enable her to crit all in a single skill. It gives her star absorb up, which is only 500%, but she is a ruler, so she has significantly higher base star absorb up compared to classes like Berserker and Avenger, so 500% is more than enough. 10 star per turn generation is a pretty standard effect, but it's really consistent, and of course if you are able to boost it to 30, it's absolutely insane. It makes her crits almost guaranteed every single turn. However, I don't think it's worth bringing a specific water field applying character for it, just because it doesn't really affect her damage or, you know, other real buff effects. It just makes her crits a little bit more consistent, which is fixable by bringing like a Star Bomb CE or 2030 for challenge quests specifically. And also, airspace is a pretty limited field choice. It's really rare. It's whenever your servants look like they're floating mid-air and fighting a giant boss usually. And also there are no supports that are able to apply this field, so it's just like a cool thematic bonus. Same with her star bomb. You know, having 10 stars immediately is pretty good, especially on an arts servant, because the arts 50 MP charging support does not have immediate star generation effects, unlike Ruler Scotty and Coin Sky of Light. So if you do want to crit on the first turn, you know, having immediate stars is pretty helpful. I will say 10 stars is a lot of times, you know, a bit annoying because it's not really consistent. However, you can once again just bring a star bomb to mitigate it if you are fighting in a challenge quest. And of course, 30 immediate stars is really good, but still not worth bringing a specific support to trigger it. All of this is only on a 5-turn cooldown as well, so if you are doing a challenge quest, you can use this skill relatively rapidly. It only has 2 turns of downtime, so overall, I like this skill a lot as well. And finally, Melusine's third skill is an 80 MP battery that also comes with a 30% MP damage up for 3 turns, as well as a 2-time invul for 3 turns. And it also only has a 6-turn cooldown. So here it is, the super broken, overtuned skill that Melusine has. 80 MP battery is absolutely ridiculous, and her refund is already one of the best in the entire game. It does not get nerfed at all because she has a big battery. This also comes with a really good MP damage boost effect for 3 turns. It is 30%, but you know, with all of her 30% added up together, it's a lot. And it also does not overlap with her other buff types, so it's really good as well. And finally, it also comes with a superb survival skill in the form of the 2x 3 turn invul. In a team, this makes this skill a lot less awkward. You don't have to think about, oh, whether I should save the battery for the survival in challenge quest or I should just use it immediately. You should always just use it immediately, because 2x 3 turn invul in a team, she might not even get all of them exhausted within 2 to 3 turns. And she is a ruler, so she doesn't really need that much babysitting anyways, and it only has a 6-turn cooldown. Usually MP batteries that are 80 or beyond in this game has traditionally had 7-turn cooldowns. Point me out if I'm wrong, but this is like the only one that is a 6-turn cooldown on a looping MP, you know, not counting someone like Jekyll and Hyde. So I don't know, this is absolutely ridiculous, and I don't understand why they just give her something just completely overtuned. Like, no other character would have this skill, and no other character should have this skill, but I guess because she's Melusine, she can have this skill. Her passives aren't anything crazy. Match Resistance B is just a carryover from her Lancer form. It's only 17.5% debuff resist, so it doesn't really do that much. Riding A+ also doesn't do that much because it does help her Mighty Chains, but she is an art servant, so her Mighty Chains in solos are not that relevant. And then finally, she has Fairy Knight C. It's kind of a theme of this year's Summer Fae Knights. They all have anti-man critical damage buffs, and it is only 12%, so overall I don't think any of her passives are particularly impressive. And finally, Melusine's MP is an AoE 5-hit Arts MP that gives her a 30% critical damage up for 3 turns. The MP also deals 150% extra damage against Earth attribute enemies, and finally its overcharge effect is a 3-turn attack up that happens before the MP actually lands, that scales from 20% all the way up to 40%. So yeah, this is another very powerful AoE looping MP with a 0.42 base MP gain on Melusine herself and a 5-hit AoE Arts MP. This is definitely one of the strongest refunding MPs in the game. It also is a ramp up MP in 2 different aspects. It ramps up her attack, considering most meta supports already supply you with 50% worth of Arts up, and she already has 30% on her first skill as well. So ramping up a different type of buff that is a little bit more lacking in a typical looping composition is usually a good thing. This also applies to her face cards that are not arts as well, which helps with her critical damage playstyle a lot, considering her other ramp up effect is a 30% crit up for 3 turns. So on the 3rd turn after using her MP back to back to back, she's able to ramp up to 90% crit up just from her MP. She is definitely a very powerful crit servant on top of being a super powerful arts looper. And it also has the typical anti-earth. Like, can we stop getting anti-earth? You know, but regardless of how uncreative giving another AoE looper anti-earth is, it is a very wide coveraging anti-trait. You know, it covers a lot of non-servant trash mobs on top of already technically covering 1/3 of all servants. Super good farming MP, you know, with the anti-earth. It doesn't go with overcharge, but you know, instead what goes with overcharge is the ramp up MP. It also ramps up crit damage. So overall, it's just a super simple but powerful MP. So how do I feel about Summer Melusine? Well, compared to a lot of these super gimmicky 4 stars ever released this summer, she is really simple. All of her skills don't have too many crazy, you know, weird effects, and her MP is also pretty straightforward. In terms of farming, well, Summer Melusine is one of the best arts loopers in the entire game because of the following reasons. First of all, her refund is completely not gimped despite having a massive MP battery. Compared to her other 50 MP charging AoE arts looping peers, she refunds essentially the same as anyone else. Obviously it varies a little bit, but in general it's more than enough. But then you remember, she's an 80 MP charger instead of a 50 MP charger, and that's when things start to get a little bit ridiculous because of the existence of a Pen 2 as well. So what people actually do when they loop with Melusine is that they have their Pen 2 maxed out and then they use their skill 3 immediately, and then you use double Castoria's skill 3 to boost her MP gain and MP damage on the first wave. Then on the following 2 waves, if you are using single core, all you have to do is charge her with 2 Castorias and a plug Oberon, which combines into a 170 MP charge in total, which means that you only have to make up for 30 extra refund across 2 different turns, which is extremely easy for a character with refund as good as Melusine's. So according to my calculations now, there aren't a single node in the game right now that allows me to test this, but if Melusine is killing with her MP alone, she is actually able to loop 111 Berserker nodes without any starting charge. Now, that is kind of ridiculous because you get the least MP back whenever you hit a Berserker. So that means a 111 Berserker node provides you with the least refund. This means that Melusine can loop on anything. As long as you do enough damage, literally any combination of enemy number and enemy class, Melusine would be able to single core loop, which is quite impressive for an arts looper, considering that was the biggest draw for the Buster looping system, because you don't really have to worry about enemy counts and because they don't rely on any form of refund. What I find even more hilarious is usually Buster loopers don't allow you to run no starting charge unless you count Kuro, but one of these Buster loopers that are able to bypass this limit and run any CE is OG Melusine. So essentially what they did was they just released Melusine but in arts form, and she can still loop on anything she wants as long as she does enough damage. So yeah, I guess that's her defining character trait, which is she can loop on anything she wants as long as she does enough damage. Speaking of damage, loopability and refund is not the only problem these days for farming. Arguably, damage can be the bigger problem. So how is Melusine's damage looking? Melusine actually does extremely decent damage. It depends on the composition, but Melusine can actually slightly outdamage Space Ishtar even, especially if Space Ishtar were to miss one of her arts buffs on her 3rd skill. Melusine, despite being a ruler, has the highest attack stat out of all rulers, so the raw attack difference between her and an Avenger is actually not that big. And also add in the fact that rulers, just like Avengers, have a 1.1 time base damage multiplier, means that rulers actually don't do bad damage just because of their class. Usually they do bad damage because of their stat spread being extremely heavy on the HP side, but Melusine is not the case. So Melusine actually does a lot of good damage, and once again, she just like Space Ishtar, she's able to ramp up her MP damage. The relationship between their looping damage is going to be very similar when we discussed Summer Kama versus Space Ishtar, where she outdamages Summer Kama's first 2 waves pretty easily, but then Summer Kama's 3rd wave does, come back and outdamage both Space Ishtar and Ruler Melusine. However, that is before we take into consideration the 2 very common anti-traits that Melusine actually possess. Melusine has a 30% anti-chaotic mod on her 1st skill, as well as a 150% damage against earth enemies on her MP itself. So as long as she hits one of them, especially if she hits anti-earth, she suddenly is able to outdamage her other competitions really consistently and by quite a bit. And both chaotic and earth are very common traits amongst enemies, especially earth, because it not just hit like technically 1/3 of the servants, it also hits a lot of trash mobs. As you can see here in this long list of earth attribute enemies, they're all very familiar faces in farming nodes no matter which wave they are in. So Melusine actually has extremely good coverage, and God forbid the earth servant also is chaotic, she's gonna dish out a massive amount of damage. While Summer Melusine is trumping most of her other competition in the neutral damage category, her true competition comes in the form of Summer Ibuki, especially considering both of them are on rate up right now on JP, so people are definitely going to ask. Summer Ibuki, since her debut last year, has proven herself to be one of the strongest farming AoE characters in the entire game. And the biggest reason behind that is on top of everything she has, 50 MP battery, good refund, high attack stat, good skill set, she is a Berserker. The Berserker class in farming is just kind of broken and kind of the best class because they don't need to consider defense, and that is the biggest disadvantage of a Berserker. In terms of farming, when we start considering Ibuki's 1.5 times class advantage damage compared to Summer Melusine's neutral damage, the damage gap starts to widen. Doesn't help that both of them have the anti-earth niche, meaning that they will both excel on the same kinds of farming nodes. Summer Melusine still has her edge in single core in the form of even more flexibility in what kind of nodes she can farm. However, a lot of times that is often overkill. Like, when are you actually farming a 1-1-1 node with an AoE character? You might be able to refund, but you might not be able to do enough damage unless you have her at extremely high MP levels. In that case, Summer Ibuki actually hits those thresholds easier, and in most cases, her refund is still enough to carry her in most looping conditions. So Summer Melusine is a little bit overkill in that situation, and in most cases I would say Summer Ibuki would still be the superior choice. In multi-core, both of them occupy a little bit of a different niche. Summer Melusine does not provide the team with any form of support. However, she has even more flexibility in terms of looping because you don't really have to give her any MP charge skills. On the flip side, Summer Ibuki might need a little bit of help in order for her to fire off her first MP. So you can run units that needs more MP charge on their own, for example a single target without much MP battery skills with Melusine, in order to take advantage of that. However, Summer Ibuki has team utility as opposed to Summer Melusine's very selfish skill set. Summer Ibuki is able to provide the team with a charisma effect with her first skill, and especially if her teammate is a Summer Servant, she can even help them refund more MP. And Summer Ibuki can also further buff her teammate if she's not the main damage dealer with her skill 2, buffing their Buster and Arts damage. And also for specific units like Tonaliko, who really needs that cooldown reduction, Summer Ibuki also pairs with her a lot better than someone like Summer Melusine. So overall, I would say for farming, if you are deciding between the two and you don't have either, you don't have any other choices hyper invested as well, I'd still recommend Summer Ibuki just because she is a Berserker, but that doesn't mean that the second place of Arts Loopers in the entire game is anything bad. And of course, if you are fighting against Berserkers and Moon Cancers, while those situations are not guaranteed, Summer Melusine will almost always prevail against Summer Ibuki, so at least you have that. In terms of Challenge Quest performance, Melusine is in my opinion once again a top tier option, because she is in the Arts card type, which is kind of the undisputed best card type for Challenge Quest just because of how powerful their supports are. And of course she is in the Ruler class, and that means she is a lot more tanky than other servants when you are facing off against the standard 6 classes. Ruler has traditionally already been pretty good in Challenge Quests, and the usual gripe about them is that you are sacrificing a lot of damage because typically they don't do really good damage, but Melusine obviously has one of the highest DPSs out of any ruler in the game, so that is very much less of a problem in my personal opinion. Melusine also has a team survival skill in her skill 1 to further protect her teammates in the form of a damage cut effect. She can also survive very well with her skill 3's 2x3 turn invul, especially in a team when you combine that with Castoria's MP and Castoria's skill 3 and whatnot. You can just basically not take damage for, very long extended period of times. And even when she takes damage, once again, because she is a ruler, she doesn't really care that much. So when in terms of selecting your face cards and sequencing your MPs, you can actually play a little bit more reckless with Melusine. For example, you can use Castoria's MP to mainly bolster her damage instead of chaining it after her MP to get that bonus overcharge. And you can also prioritize on picking Melusine's face cards over picking your support's face cards to loop their MP, instead trying to do as much damage as possible with Melusine's critical damage, which obviously is very powerful because she can loop her MP and gain a bunch of crit ups. There really isn't a lot to say about Melusine in terms of Challenge Quest. She's just very straightforward to use, and she kind of works in any scenario, and especially if you just slap a Castoria in your team, she's going to perform very well. The second support can be whatever you want depending on the situation. She also obviously has the 2 anti-traits that are very widespread, increasing her coverage. This doesn't just help in farming, this also allows her to dish out a lot of extra damage against certain bosses, especially bosses that match both chaotic and earth attributes, which is honestly not rare at all. So Melusine is going to have that niche against them as well. So compared to someone like Summer Ibuki, who also is very easy to use in challenge quests, but instead you might have to play a little bit more safe because she is a very fragile berserker, Melusine can kind of just not care about anything. All of these good qualities somewhat do extend to her ability to solo as well. Now, on paper, she isn't the best solo unit ever. She doesn't have any form of HP regeneration. Her skill 1 damage cut doesn't even apply to herself. And of course, her only survival skill is the 2x 3-turn invul on her skill 3 on a 6-turn cooldown. And she is also an art servant, and generally I don't really prefer art servants as a solo unit just because they can't really take full advantage of the mighty chain system when they try to brave chain. They will lead with an arts MP and they will not able to pick another arts cards to follow it up to gain back massive amounts of MP. And of course, when you are soloing and you use a arts brave chain, you also waste the 20% of bonus MP generation because you're MPing anyways, unless you do have enough MP gauge to get an extra stack of overcharge, but in general it just doesn't really benefit you at all. But because she is a ruler, so a lot of times she does have effectively double her actual HP, and also because she does take a lot of advantage from guaranteeing brave chains every single turn with her crit skill set and all that, she's able to dish out massive amounts of damage if she's guaranteed to select 3 of her cards every single turn. If you really do want to use her as a solo unit, you can always use Habertrot with her to solve her sustain issue, and a lot of the cases you aren't actually, using her as a straight up solo unit, but instead she is the one left alive and, maybe all your other supports gets killed off, and opposed to someone like Summer Ibuki who is kind of screwed if they are stranded without a support, Summer Melusine can kind of just, hold her own at least for a couple more extra turns just because she's a ruler, and also all of the other positives I've mentioned above. She's able to get a lot of buffs just from her MP alone and isn't over reliant on her skills. So yeah, nothing too remarkable to talk about. She's just straight up good and easy to use. Simple but effective is probably the best way I'll sum her challenge quest performance up. In conclusion, Summer Melusine definitely feels like the logical next evolutionary step for AoE Arts loopers. She has essentially the best looping freedom, as I like to call it, in the entire game, as she doesn't really care about any enemy count as well as enemy class in terms of looping. She also doesn't need any starting charge Cs to do it, as long as you have double Castoria plug Oberon, which makes her a super powerful option because you once again can run her against any node as long as you make her do enough damage. She definitely feels like a upgraded version of Space Ishtar and Summer Kama because on top of that, looping freedom, she also doesn't really lose out on damage compared to the 2 other Avengers despite being in the ruler class. However, she is stuck in an awkward predicament because she is rated up at the same time with Summer Ibuki's rerun, and if you were to ask me to pick one between the 2 to heavily invest in without any bias, I would still recommend Summer Ibuki because she is in the Berserker class. In terms of farming especially, Summer Ibuki is going to do a lot more damage at the same MP levels. And also in challenge quests, while I do prefer the tankiness of Melusine, in most cases you also don't really need that if you're running Summer Ibuki because Arts can provide her with multiple terms of survival. Arts AoE loopers at this point are kind of like iPhones. They come up with a slightly better one every year. Well, sometimes a much better one, but it really depends on you whether that you want to upgrade them or not and how much budget you have to invest in these characters. I will never recommend like any AoE Arts damage dealers as a must roll, but what I will tell you is that Summer Melusine is essentially the second best AoE Arts looper in the entire game, and in certain situations can even be the best AoE Arch Looper in the game. So certainly a character worth investing in if you already are into Melusine, and she can essentially take care of everything that the game throws at you in the foreseeable future. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I apologize for how late it is, but finally we are done. And best of luck for rolling for Summer Melusine if you decide to do some last minute rolls before the event ends. And I'll see you guys in the next one.